In America's national parks, people vanish without a trace. Experienced hikers disappear in broad daylight. Search teams find nothing. The government knows more than they're telling. What stalks the wilderness? A map glows under my desk lamp, tiny red pins swallowing the green. Pacific Peaks, Appalachian Hollows, the high deserts of the Four Corners, the glazed rock of the Sierra. Names whisper like old wind through pine. Yosemite, Glacier, Great Smoky Mountains, Olympic. You trace the roads with a finger, but the places where people step off aren't near roads. They rest in the seams of the land, boulder fields, marshy bowls, saddles between ridges where the weather changes like a thought. I run the audio from a ranger's radio and hear only the hiss of a thunderstorm rolling in. Somewhere out there, a man counts his steps and never gets to the last number. The missing 401 pattern builds like frost on glass. A child wanders 50 yards from a picnic blanket at noon, vanishes from a circle of adults. Tracks show small shoes moving across sand, then nothing. The next print erased as if a hand lifted the boy straight up. Searchers grid the banks and pull driftwood aside, find one sock caught on a willow twig. 2 days pass. The child turns up over a ridge miles away, clothes inside out, barefoot, no scratches on the soles, whispering about the humming in the trees. A hunter steps off trail to glass a distant meadow and never radios again. His rifle leans against a stump, lunch unopened, a cap snagged on low fur. Dogs pick up a scent that circles a granite dome and climbs a gulch where no boot can climb. Old cases smear into new ones. A woman emails me a scan of an old newspaper clipping. The ink is sunburned, but the lines still cut. Family finds neatly folded clothing by creek, no body recovered. The creek runs cold enough to freeze bone, the banks slick with dark moss, the smell of iron in the water. Rangers wade waist deep and probe with poles. They bring up leaves, twigs, a single coin. The story repeats with different names, different coasts, the same unbroken sequence of confusion. There are clusters, always near water, or rock, or those peculiar berry patches where the ground feels spongy and the air holds a quiet like a church without parishioners. Patterns bleed into testimonies, and still the mind reaches for something rational. It wraps itself around cougar routes, sinkholes, human malice. Then witnesses speak, and whatever scaffolding you built leans in the wind and groans. A young father tells us about light crawling across the timberline at dusk. He stands on the porch of a rented cabin, beer sweating in his hand. His daughter plays with pine cones near the steps, counting them, singing nonsense. The light slides between trunks, not a beam, not a car, just a slow coil, pale as fish belly, moving with intent. He smells ozone and wet bark. The child laughs at a voice that sounds like his wife's, but his wife is inside, humming over the sink. He sweeps the yard with a flashlight. The beam looks thick, dust motes rolling like plankton in a current, and beyond it the dark pools wider than the world. He calls his daughter. The porch boards are smooth under his bare feet, and a cold travels up his ankles into his jaw. When he blinks, the light is nowhere. The pine cones lie scattered. The child is already walking toward the tree line like someone invited her to follow. She stops when his voice cracks her name. Old hikers talk about the sound of glass breathing. It is not wind and not animal. It presses against the drum of the ear, turns the forest into a slow lung. A park volunteer from the Smokies remembers a night on a ridge when the stars looked close and wrong. A wide orange pillar rose behind the hemlocks, silent, leaving no smoke, then extinguished midair. He found 3 campers at dawn sitting on a log with their tent flattened underfoot. They stared as if their eyes had remained open all night. Their watches showed 3 different hours, none close to dawn. They boiled water without fuel and told him they had not moved, though their footprints crossed one another like a chore the forest made them do. People return without their names for hours at a time, lips blue, pupils pinprick small, shoes tied into knots they say they never learned. They trace circles in the dirt with sticks and count down from 10 in a language their spouses don't know. Their skin smells faintly of something metallic, a coin rubbed between fingers. Afterward, they come back on tape. In the studio, I kill the lights and listen to a woman describe the thing that stood at the edge of her camp and did not shift weight the way a deer shifts. Her sentence staggers as she reaches for a word that won't come. She says there is no word. She says the noise came from everywhere. She denotes the texture of the quiet, thick, rich, felted, a wool pulled over one sense at a time. From the trail reports, the anomalies pile. Radios die at the same bend in the canyon, compasses swing and stay, crows turn their heads toward one stone and then refuse to fly. The scent of rain pushes through a clear sky. A man hears his brother's voice in a ravine where no human stands. People bring back triangles drawn on napkins and ash stains shaped like hands. They dream of staircases buried under loam. There is another engine in these stories, a low note you feel more than hear. It roars in the silence from the agencies that own the trailheads, the landing pads, the radios, and the maps. A ranger with 25 seasons behind his badge leans in a doorway and refuses to say yes or no. He adjusts his belt and tells me they don't keep a centralized list of lost. Each park has its own ledger, each page thick with pencil strokes and rain swells. When I file requests, weeks pass before a reply. Redactions blacken whole paragraphs, leaving verbs like bones. Training memos instruct staff to refer media to public affairs and to refrain from speculation. Families sit on folding chairs under borrowed shade and wait for a helicopter that never comes because the wind is wrong or the funding evaporates. A retired search coordinator tells me he buried a report because it sounded like folklore, and he didn't want to poison the practical minds of his crew. It grows heavier. In one file, an after-action note mentions a night flight by a helicopter without identification, landing on a meadow closed to the public. Men step out without insignia and carry a hard case into the trees. They return after 20 minutes, faces wrapped in shimags against dust that doesn't exist. Another note records a high-resolution aerial scan of a canyon, LiDAR sweeping the slope, revealing geometric voids under rock the size of barns. The next page hints at a liaison with a federal department the ranger doesn't name. The page after that is gone. I reach out to a biologist with decades studying migratory paths. He answers once, then goes quiet. A family requests unreleased photographs from a recovery and receives 7 images, all of empty trail, and one of a track in mud that ends at the shadow of a log. Interagency emails leak and suggest a standing order to avoid language that invites myths. No mention of lights, mimicry, or anomalous temperatures. It reads like careful erasure. The files cost money to access, and the accounting for that money disappears into a pivot table that surges and drains like a tide chart. Meanwhile, the on-the-ground window closes. New signage goes up: area rehabilitation, trail closure, erosion mitigation, seasonal restrictions. A wildlife camera shutters itself at the exact minute a timecode leaps an hour. A volunteer map board loses 3 pins overnight. No one admits to removing them. This isn't a neat conspiracy with a single room and a smoking file cabinet. It behaves like the weather, cold fronts meeting warm air, forming fog where bodies stumble off trail and don't leave scuffs when they fall. The silence feels intentional, sculpted. That is the worst sound of all. Truth does not vanish. It sinks into soil, drinks the spring runoff, climbs into needles and waits for feet to crush it soft again. The answer does not sit in a paragraph. It wanders through lodgepole groves and down into ravines where the sun reaches at noon and leaves by 2. Out there, you taste tin on your tongue where no metal lies. Out there, heat pocketed under rock contradicts frost on the grass. Somewhere below an ancient slide, a stairwell lingers, built for knees that bend differently. I don't promise monsters. I promise a pattern that does not want language wrapped around it. Walk any trail long enough and the forest opens a door and offers you a coin. Either you believe the quiet or you learn its other meaning. We go back anyway. We go because a widow draws me on a napkin the outline of her husband's boot and places it next to my phone so I cannot stop seeing it. We go because an uncle wakes at 3, knowing his nephew is watching the moon from under hemlocks and cannot feel cold. We go because the parks belong to people who pack out their trash and hide food from bears and stack stones they shouldn't stack, leaving markers for lives that need markers. We go with respect. We go slow. We go with a camera and a recorder and a small mirror on a string. The mirror tells you if the sky is still there when you look down. A compass tells you if the world intends to turn by the same rules as yesterday. Subscribe and come with me. We chart clusters. We speak to handlers whose dogs refuse to cross invisible lines. We walk creek beds where water runs silent against rock that should sing. We lay current cases over old disappearances and show you where they kiss. We listen to people whose stories get laughed at and find the math beneath the folklore. We won't barge in with bravado. We will light a candle in the vault and hold it steady so the shape of the dark reveals itself by what it refuses to touch. There will be nights with no footage because the sound recorder ticks once and then forgets it is a machine. There will be days where the air aches like bruised fruit and we turn back because turning back is the wisdom the forest respects. We won't promise an answer wrapped in bright tape. We will promise the work, the careful walk, the steady gaze the land demands. America's darkest stories aren't written on paper. They etch themselves into tree rings and the grooves of granite polished by ice. Press your palm to the bark and it is cool, slightly damp, rough where woodpeckers hunted. Think about what hears you breathing. Then help us keep the light on these names, these trails, these unmarked clearings. Click to stay with the search, to hold a rope that stretches over the next rise and down into a hollow where a radio keeps hissing long after the battery should have died. Are you willing to listen when the woods speak back?